And welcome back to my channel, everyone. My name is Roehl Sybing. This is DocWork. It's been a minute. I'm now a research associate at the University of North Dakota. And what we're going to do today is something new as we bring the channel back up. I'm going to preview the next couple of videos that I'm going to make for this channel by talking about an ethnographic data set that I generated through AI using Perplexity, which is what I'm using right now. I'm going to show what the data set is going to look like, what we are going to discuss in terms of ethnographic research, and hopefully this will give you an idea of what data analysis in ethnographic methods might look like. So if you are a new researcher or you're just getting into ethnography, hopefully the next couple of videos are going to show you what ethnographic methods, ethnographic data might look like. A word of caution, of course, we are using AI because the idea is to create a data set that people can play around with when they don't have access to an ethnographic site. So this project came about from my experiences when I was in my PhD program. The second year, we were told to find a site to do ethnographic research for a semester. Then you spend the second semester analyzing data. Problem with that was, depending on the context that you want to work in, it can take a long time to set up the necessary relationships to get access into the field so that you can collect the data that you are looking for. And this can create problems, especially if you're a new researcher. Certainly the issues of access, informed consent, getting permission, getting people to trust you in order to get rich data from the field. All of those are necessary experiences for an ethnographer. But at the same time, the other skills are just as important. Data analysis, organizing data in a rigorous manner that allows you to empirically get rich insights and report them in a meaningful way. And definitely, I don't want to tell people to use generative AI to create data that represents the real world in a way that you would publish it as if you are representing the real world. That's not what we're doing here. But if the goal is to train researchers to understand how to do data analysis, my feeling is that generative AI is going to be very helpful in that regard by giving students, emerging researchers, those who are unfamiliar with data analysis, something to play with. And that's the data set, the synthetic data set that we are going to look at today. The next couple of videos are going to talk about the discrete components of this ethnographic data set so that we can talk about how to analyze ethnographic data and also give you an idea of what kind of data you should be trying to generate when you actually go out into the field. Certainly, everyone, when it comes time to reporting their ethnography, they should be playing around with authentic data, but this is a good sandbox to play in. So I'm going to go through the process of how this data set came to be. So it starts with a prompt. I'm using Perplexity. Many people will use Claude or ChatGPT. You definitely want to give the AI as many details as you can. That way, the AI will have more to play around with and create something that is closer to what you're looking for. I'm explaining to the AI what I'm looking for. I want to generate an ethnographic data set for the purpose of training graduate students in data analysis. And then I want to generate the data that would come from a multi-sited ethnographic study. You also want to give the, what is it? The objectives. So I said the goal is to use this data set to model data collection, observe member checking, and establish data triangulation. These are also concepts that are useful in qualitative research. Specifically member checking. When you go out into the field and do observations, you also want to check with your research participants about what they said, why they said it, what they did, why they did, etc. And the term data triangulation is especially important. Especially triangulation is a concept that we use in qualitative research to establish the necessary research rigor. Just because someone says something in an interview um, doesn't mean that they follow it in their everyday lives, which is why we observe them. And when we have those two data sources referring to the same thing or exploring insights about the same thing, you are basically triangulating the data to generate insights. That's empirical and rigorous. And we'll continue. For this model data set, we will observe three different coffee shops, one that is a major chain, one that's an independent cafe in an urban area, and an independent cafe in a suburban area. The goal of this study would be to identify differences in interaction and behavior by participants within coffee shop environments. This is where we want to give an example that's accessible to everybody. As someone who was in a social justice education PhD program, we had classmates of various contexts and research inquiries. It's really challenging to find a common thread among all of those things that would make it easier for someone like me to understand what my classmates were doing in terms of their field work and their data analysis, which is why which is why I wanted to give an example that is accessible, but also meaningful. The accessible part is observe a cafe, or observe three different coffee shops, but also do it in a way that might be meaningful theoretically. Again, the idea is not to use this data set to propose theoretical developments about interaction or linguistics or education. But the goal is to have data that's meaningful, but also something that most, if not everybody, understands, which is why I've designed this prompt the way that it did. We're going to go through and scroll through the rest of this thread in Perplexity. So this will give you to give you an idea of what the data set that we're generating looks like. Now, Perplexity will come back and summarize the structure of the data set again, and we'll respond with three different sites that I proposed. Give a couple more details so that I can confirm what the generative AI is producing and if it's on track or not. And then we have the data types that I mentioned: field notes, interviews, documents, and then, well, we do want to emphasize that it is a synthetic data set. In this case, it's going to go through examples of what field notes might look like. Everyone does field notes in a different way. This is probably not how I would do field notes if I was going into the field today, but it makes sense to me. It tells me what the ethnographer is observing, where they are, what time of day it is, what day of the week it is, what's going on in these different cafes. And that will be useful. There will be another video in the series about positionality. So depending on someone's position relative to their research context, their methods, their way of looking at the world, their way of engaging with research participants is going to differ. Definitely differ from mine as well, from the way I would do ethnography, and that's okay. There's no one way to do ethnographic research methods as long as you follow a particular set of guidelines when it comes to establishing research rigor in your ethnography. Scroll down a little bit more, again, give you some examples of interviews. In an ethnography, you are trying to, in order to establish triangulation, you're looking to establish multiple forms of data in order to be able to view the cultural context or the cultural practice from different angles to get rich insights that you can report later. So yes, we have the field notes. We will check them against the interview excerpts as well to create a more contextualized picture. And then something that we also want to get are documents. These will tell us, these are things that we might pick up in the research context, such as a flyer, such as a menu, maybe pictures. You want to make sure that you follow ethical boundaries. Don't take pictures of people who don't want to be photographed. Make sure you don't use people's names without their consent, etc. But if you can collect documents in order to provide further contextualization, the more angles you have to look at the cultural context, the better. Usually, generative AI will give you a follow-up question. Would you like me to do this? How would you like to proceed on the next step? So I usually don't follow these. There will be instances where I think, oh yeah, the AI is on the right track. So yeah, please continue what you're doing. But I do want to set up some intermediary steps. So, we do need the ethnographer and their profile because, as my advisor likes to say, the researcher is the most important data collection tool, and for data analysis as well, for that matter. So we do need to establish who exactly is studying these three coffee shops. So I provided some basic details. The ethnographer is a graduate student in her mid-20s, studying sociology, focusing on interaction. And we have a name, a pseudonym rather, but not just mid-20s, but 26. Might be important, might not be, but these details can matter somewhere down the line. So second year PhD student at a large urban university. That's different than where I was studying at UMass Amherst, which is way out in the sticks. And I say that lovingly. And then we talk about what Casey Miller, the ethnographer, is looking to focus on. Because as an ethnographer, I might be looking at different things than this ethnographer. I'm interested in how people have a dialogue with each other to construct meaning. And that might be different than the form of negotiation that Casey Miller is trying to study. Specifically, how people negotiate norms of interaction in third places, such as cafes. And so there are biographical details such background, social position, ethnographic style, access, role presentation. All of those things might be useful to the data analysis. So when I talk about positionality, and I'll talk about positionality in a future video, uh, detail matters. The more that we talk about ourselves, the more that we can reflect on how we are collecting and analyzing data, and also give to the research audience an idea of how we perceive and why we perceive what we are looking at and listening to. So all of those details really are important in some way to the research. Will this Casey Miller be adding all of these details in her research report? Probably not. But it's really important to lay it out as ethnographers. It's really important to lay it out for ourselves so that we can think about how we are affecting the research and how the context is affecting us. Now we'll go into a research question. You want, if possible, to have a research question in mind. You can go into a research context sight unseen without a specific inquiry. It's possible, but you might end up missing details that a focus that the research question brings can provide. I hope I said that sentence correctly, but the research question really needs to be defined before you go into the field. And so we have a research question that is useful to interaction in third spaces. So here we have this research question: how do patterns of interaction and social use differ across chain and independent coffee shops? Because if you think about Starbucks, and if you think about, what is it? Independent coffee shop that was created by cafe aficionados. So how would the environment differ and how would interaction differ between these contexts? There are some sub questions as well. It might contribute to the analytical lens, but in that case, we'll skip ahead. But we do want to work on the analytical lens. Once you have your research question in place, you want to think about the question and say, how should we look at the field as we are collecting data? And then that will also inform how we will analyze the data later on. But we do need to define the analytical lens. And I say that because we'll need to guide data collection, particularly field notes. And then I ask this question: is there an established framework in the peer-reviewed scholarship to guide data collection? This is really important because all scientific knowledge is based on previous scientific knowledge. Uh, so you really need to ground your inquiry as best as possible in existing theory. It's possible that you may not have theory available to your specific research question or context, but if one exists, it really helps uh, the the data collection in establishing rigor. You can say, I'm grounding my analysis in what previous scholars have said. And that also helps with the dissemination of research when it comes time to write your report and submit it to reviewers at a journal. You will be able to say, I am using the relevant theories and literature in order to report these results. So we do need an analytical lens to look at the field and analyze data later. And the AI, because I'm not specifically knowledgeable about third spaces, I have an understanding through discourse analysis and sociolinguistics, but about third spaces, they have a couple of, the AI recommends a couple of tools such as third place theory. Whether this is true or not, a good thing about Perplexity is that it does provide some links, supporting links, and so we'll go ahead and click on that page that says third place theory, creating community spaces, and conceptualized by urban sociologist Ray Oldenburg. So for the moment, it seems as though this third place theory does exist in the literature. Uh, and this is the danger of synthetic data that AI, as we all know, can hallucinate. And when I'm doing my literature review, I've run into um, challenges where the AI is just making up sources, and down the line just making up theory. And that's really problematic, and you can get into serious trouble when you are wholly relying on AI and taking what it says at face value. You do want to verify everything that generative AI produces. My feeling is that the time it takes to generate text through AI plus the time it takes to verify that information is still less time than it takes to do the legwork, for humans to do the legwork. So I really do believe that generative AI is a useful tool. It should not be the teacher in terms of you taking everything it says at face value, but it should be a useful guide for your research process and for all the other things that you do with generative AI. I know there's a lot of controversy about how we might want to use it. There is a use for it. We haven't really codified it, but I believe there are benefits, and it's really important for us to make the most of those benefits in balance with the challenges. But we're getting off on a tangent. We're going to use third place theory. One of the things about an analytical lens or a framework is that you want to break down that theory or that concept into discrete items. Think about a when you go onto a travel website and you look at hotels. The ratings are divided into discrete items. How much is the price? Is it convenient? Is it clean? How is the service? So that way you don't have just one rating, a concept. What is a good hotel? What is a beautiful painting? What is an interesting movie? No, you're breaking it down into discrete elements. That way you can analyze more deeply and come to a more contextualized and rigorous conclusion about what something is. And so we're using third place theory, not just that, but we're using the analytical features of that theory. There's other suggestions, but number one third place theory really stood out, so we're going to use that. And I've made that explicit to the AI. So now we could start to make ethnographic field notes. So I do want to suggest to the AI what Casey Miller is doing, sitting in a cafe for 2 hours, observing interaction between customers and staff and between customers, and then generate field notes. And if necessary, I'll suggest revisions. And so it will produce this kind of field notes. Now, one more time, every ethnographer's practices are different. The way that I create field notes will be different from how Casey Miller does. What I do with my field notes is I write down the time when something happens and I write down what happens. Uh, if I have thoughts at the moment that's really useful to the scholarship or to my analysis, I'll write it down next to that development. But uh, this Casey Miller appears to write field notes differently. Totally okay. There is no prescription. If if you're really lost about how to write field notes, there's a video down the line that I can make. Make sure you add that in the comments of this video. And we'll continue looking at what's going on. There are times when the ethnographer is writing down the time and what is happening, but not always, which is interesting. And then at the end, so Casey Miller writes down reflexive notes at the end. What I like to do is scatter, because I do want to place my reflections close to where the developments are happening when I have those reflections. And then there's some material organizational presence, which is necessary for document collection. And that takes care of the first set of field notes, which is good. So every now and then I do want to check the AI to make sure, are we creating data that's actually rich? I've read it for myself. It looks fine, but let me ask this question. Are the field notes detailed enough to contribute to meaningful analysis in conjunction with transcripts and other data? Short answer is yes. And we come up with another concept called thick description. This is another concept in qualitative research, especially in naturalistic inquiry, where you can't necessarily replicate research from context to context, or you can't necessarily create a universal description of social theory. What you can do is provide a thick description of a particular context. That way, when your research audience reads your ethnography, they will be able to come to some approximation of immersion within that culture. Other things that are necessary for rich analysis: documentation of social interaction, observation of regulars versus newcomers, all of the other things that are useful to understanding third space theory. And so here so the short answer is yes, there is enough, at least in the field notes, to generate meaningful analysis. Once we apply our reflections to the interview transcripts. Now, I've struggled to create a Word file. One of the weaknesses of Perplexity is that it can't create external files. Sometimes it does, and this on this particular occasion, it wouldn't give me the file that I wanted. So, ChatGPT is better at that. Perplexity, not so much, apparently. So I said, let me give up. Let's move on. Let's move on. So instead, I copied and pasted into the necessary documents, which we will look at in data analysis. So right now, we want to do something called stimulated recall interviews, where we are working with the research participants and saying, do you remember this event? What do you feel when you happened upon this thing? What were you thinking when this thing happened? We also want to have a semi-structured interview format, uh, at least semi-structured or unstructured. This is where the interviewer, the ethnographer, is allowed to pursue follow-ups that come off the cuff. A structured interview is where you ask a series of questions that are determined beforehand, but don't stray from those questions at all. People will use this for the sake of establishing a sense of reliability because you're asking the same questions to the same to different participants. But when you're trying to get rich insights from an ethnographic study, I'm hard pressed to find a use for a completely structured interview without being able to ask questions in the moment. So, and then again, if possible, these questions should be related to what was observed in the field notes. So we're creating an interview guide, which should be created before you do your interviews. And so we have the man in the suit, we have the young woman, and then we've had the AI produce 5 questions each. And so for each of them, we're going to generate the transcript for the interview. And so we have these notes and then pretty good interview transcript. We're going to go ahead and there are some follow-up questions in this. It's not necessarily that you have to follow up after every response. If there are deep enough insights that are worth pursuing, then you ask the participant a follow-up question. But here we have a useful enough transcript that we've copied and pasted into another Word document. And then we'll repeat the process for the second interview. Same thing over here. We'll be able to look at this in detail. And once this is finalized, this will all be available, I'm guessing, on my website. I'll put a link in the description when that's ready. That way you'll be able to play with the data for your own experience. Do the same thing for the third interview transcript. We will continue with the third interview transcript, copying and pasting them into different documents. And then we will go on to the second site. We'll go through this because I do want to show that that the AI might make mistakes. So far, the field notes look fine. And as you'll see that the occurrences at the chain coffee shop will be different in nature to the experiences at the independent cafe. And we've selected some interview participants. And here we have our interview guide for each of the three. I guess now we have created names for each of the 3 participants. But here we have the interview transcript for interview 1 with Sam, and it looks fine. But one thing I'm noticing is that, well, let me show you. We have our 5 questions over here, and it seems to be that the questions here are in the exact order, which is what we're supposed to do, but there's not really any other follow-ups, and it's kind of boring. Now remember, a semi-structured interview, you if the participant has something interesting that might be worth probing further, then you do want to ask follow-ups in order to get richer insights. So it continues. This is when I was trying to go faster because I was confident in what the AI was generating on the first pass. But so I said, okay, do all the data from the second site. But it does skip over the follow-up questions in the semi-structured interviews. So I said, nah, we'll need to regenerate the interviews. The field notes are fine, but we need to better reflect the semi-structured interview design. So start with the first interview. Now we'll go one by one, include follow-up questions. And so now it's a little bit different. We've added some follow-ups. Might be worth editing later. I off the top of my head, I don't see any major issues, but we do have a more free-flowing conversation that allows for richer insights later on. And so once I'm confident with that, regenerate the other 2 transcripts. And this will allow us to do some discourse analysis or to corroborate the findings that we will discover in the field notes and be able to triangulate findings together. But along the way, we are doing member checking through stimulated recall in order to get the research participant to open up as much as possible about what they thought, what they saw, what they did. And so we'll be able to do the same thing with the third site. Again, make field notes, choose 3 interview respondents, make 5 questions. Now it is giving me what I want. The more that you more details that you give it, and the more that you're able to check and give feedback to the AI about what you're looking for, the more accurate that it tends to get. This within reason, because it seems to have a short-ish term memory. So if you have a thread in Perplexity that's really long, it will start to forget some of the details from before. So be careful with that. So generate the interview transcripts, and then we will have the three different transcripts that we will analyze later. What we're going to do, documents as well, but that is something that I want to come back to. But for now, we have a good we have a good data set to work with. For the moment, we have our field notes and our interviews that we will analyze together. We'll do that in a series of videos later on. But this is a good start. So just want to preview a couple of videos that I have in mind. We'll do something about how to take field notes. We'll do something about our analytical lens. This was the concept in my ethnography course that really clicked for me. I had no idea how to do field work until my professor said analytical lens, a theoretical framework, and everything suddenly clicked. Others relate to how to design a useful research question, how to talk about positionality, how to create reflections based on our observations, how to interview people based on what they saw in the field, what is discourse analysis, how do we code the data, how do we triangulate data together, what makes a good interview guide. There's going to be a lot of videos that we can create from this synthetic data set. And then maybe one more, maybe a couple more about the ethics of ethnography, how to use AI to assist you in the qualitative research process. We've done one or two videos of that already. I'm a real proponent of artificial intelligence. For better or for worse, it's going to be something that's with us. So it's really important to make the most of it as we have it. So a lot to discuss. This has been a lengthy introduction, but I hope this will give you a good idea of what the next couple of videos are going to look like. So if you like this video, hit like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Make sure you comment, tell me what you're looking for in terms of being a doctoral student, being a social science researcher, being a qualitative researcher, and hopefully I will get a chance to respond to everybody. Really want to make a community of qualitative researchers in the social sciences through this channel. So if you're interested, please join in for our next video. My name is Roehl Sybing. This is DocWork. I'll see you in the next video.